Hi, hello everyone. My name's Jonathan Becker. I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Bard College and the Director of Bard's Center for Civic Engagement. I'm also the Vice Chancellor of the Open Society University Network. We're really pleased to be here today to launch the partnership of two global networks. The Talwar Network is an organization which is involved in more than 375 institutions in 78 countries around the world, promoting engagement activities of all forms. It is a leader in its field. The Open Society University Network, a recently formed network, is committed to teaching, learning, and research across geographic and demographic boundaries, and promote civic engagement and access to underserved communities in higher education. This is a partnership of two institutions which share a global vision of higher education as a system that engages students in their communities and encourages the exchange of ideas and collective action to change the world. The panel is the start of a series of activities that will take place between the Talwar Network and Bard College. A series of panels, engagements, contests, and conferences which speak to our shared values. The title of the current activity has a name, COVADE, which represents Communities of Virtual Alliance and Interdependence, COVADE. The goals of COVADE are to collect and share stories and experiences of universities and students around the globe, to share, to learn how they're mitigating the crisis, to document steps and strategies that may be of use elsewhere, to provide uplifting and interesting content and strengthen support for the notion of universities acting in the public interest. Today, we have three panelists who will speak and then be followed by questions. Our first panelist will be Anthony Monaco, or Tony Monaco, who's the president of Tufts University and who also chairs the steering committee for the Talwar Network. In his free time, he's a professor of biology and neuroscience. Our second speaker will be Sarah Ladron de Guevara, who's the president of Universidad Veracruzana in Veracruz, Mexico, and she is the Talwar Network vice chair. She's also a former museum director and an accomplished anthropologist. The final speaker will be Leon Botstein, who is the long-serving president of Bard College and the chancellor of the Open Society University Network. Some of you may realize that I'm not Laureline Hoyt, who is the head of the Talwar Network at Tufts. Laureline could not make this today, so I will be serving as moderator. I wanted to thank her staff at the Talwar Network and Tufts University, as well as the people at Bard Center for Civic Engagement, especially Erin Canan, for their hard work in making today's event and the entire project move forward. Thank you for joining us together today. And without further ado, I want to turn to Tony Monaco.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm delighted to join colleagues, and I welcome the opportunity for the Talwar Network to partner with Open Society University Network. Our two networks share a goal of promoting critical mission of civic engagement in higher education. So this partnership is really a natural collaboration. It's especially appropriate that we work together around issues raised by this unprecedented public health crisis. Promoting and supporting public health has long been a central part of the civic engagement mission for Talwar Network member institutions. Many of the winning and finalist projects in our annual McJanet Prize competition since 2009, for example, have focused on access to medical care, capacity building, and improvements to infrastructure. The current COVID-19 pandemic places unprecedented stress on individuals, institutions, and societies. Our communities need universities' talent, creativity, and compassion to help respond. Of course, university research in medicine and public health is and will remain critical. But there are many other domains in which our students, faculty, and staff can make a vital difference. Today, I'd like to highlight just a few examples from Tufts, the institution I know best. First, innovation is in addressing specific challenges in treatment and public health. we've had great opportunities to shine with ingenuity and problem solving. For example, there was a donation of 6,000 desperately needed masks to Tufts Medical Center, but the old elastic bands were breaking before they could be used. Engineering students from Tufts, MIT, and Harvard crowdsourced repair solutions and prototyped them on campus in our makerspace. They then moved to full production mode to an emptied out lab in our dental school on the Boston campus. This work allowed the medical center in its first week of dealing with COVID patients to double the number of masks they had available. We've also instituted a fever monitoring project. Tufts engineering and computer science faculty working to address the challenge of monitoring temperatures and symptoms of individuals at high risk remotely. We've developed the software for submission of diagnostic information from households remotely via cell phone and other means. This will allow mobile interventions for testing and isolation to protect the most vulnerable in those households. We've also been collaborating with a major academic medical center with the goal of piloting in our host community of Medford. A second area where universities can make a difference is to dedicate university resources and facilities to help reduce the strain on the healthcare system. Many opportunities here, given the shift to remote instruction and emptying out of our campuses for de-densification. Tufts committed to this very early, and we're proud to see the many other institutions in our metropolitan area now offering their facilities as well. How can a campus space be used? Probably the most important use is for housing, first responders, healthcare workers on the front line, other populations at risk. Even COVID positive recovering patients and other ambulatory care patients can be housed in your spaces. We've also seen many universities be requested as drive-through testing sites and depending on facilities and local needs. Of course, our campuses are not entirely empty. Most students in our residence halls went home when we shifted to online distance learning. But travel and just logistical challenges and challenges arising from the pandemic made this impossible for some. Others did not have a safe home to go to. In reviewing applications to remain in campus housing, we tried to make sure we were protecting our most vulnerable students. And we provided emergency funds and support to help students in need as they made a sudden and unexpected transition. Offering campus facilities requires strong partnerships with local government, healthcare providers, as well as cross-functional support on your campus. Universities should try wherever possible to leverage existing community partner relationships. For Tufts, these were partnerships with our local municipalities of Medford, Somerville, and Boston. Our healthcare providers, Tufts Medical Center, which is a separate organization from our university, but is our major teaching hospital. And we've also worked closely with Cambridge Health Alliance, who operates community hospitals closest to our undergraduate campus. What does it require? Cross-functional support from your campus facilities, operations, IT, and others. An inventory of the available campus resources, a clear operating agreements with your partners, and an exit strategy for returning your facilities to university use after they are no longer required. I encourage colleagues to think creatively about how to engage in the planning process for this effort. At Tufts, we were very fortunate to draw on planning and logistical expertise from a cadre of mid-career officers from the armed forces who are in residence as fellows at our Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, our graduate school of international affairs. They provided guiding principles to help in our planning, a clear process for vetting and triaging requests that involve multiple municipal and clinical partners, how to assign specific uses to designated zones on campus, and how to separate residential zones for different populations, how to work with our partner organizations to provide services that are in non-student zones as much as possible, and how to have transparent communication with your community and your neighboring locals. Take housing as an example of the practical issues to be considered. You need to assess the logistics, rooms which are isolatable versus communal rooms, community versus private single-use bathrooms, stairs versus elevators. What type of requests will you get for housing? First responders, healthcare workers, and your own university staff, including your police officers. They may be better suited in smaller group suites with separate entryways with no horizontal transport on floors. You can separate healthy workers from those that are exposed and quarantining and those that might be COVID positive and isolating. You can also look at patient populations which could recover on your campuses, including COVID positive patients who were rehabilitating at the end of their course and no longer required inpatient hospital critical care. These might be better in multi-bed units off corridors like a traditional dorm and run like special nurses units. The healthcare providers that you partner with are the experts. They know what they need. The process will require close collaboration, but listen to them, know what resources you have, and they will choose how to best use them for their needs. It's well worth the effort. We're pleased to say that we already have first responders on campus, and we expect our first patients this week. If helpful, we're very happy to share our guidance we have developed at Tufts for such community support partnerships. Information can be found at http://coronavirus.tufts.edu or email cove19@tufts.edu. A third area of opportunity is innovative uses of academic expertise to advance policy and community response. Research undertaken by mathematician Moon Duchin to help match hospitals with closest appropriate university resources supports this use of campus to meet the needs of the healthcare system, builds on the combination of mathematical modeling, geospatial analysis, and data on hospital and university capacity. It's a clear example of the way in which mathematics and social science can help address a critical issue in public health currently. Of course, there is no one size fits all. An approach for how universities can make a difference really depends on the compelling opportunities at the local level. You need to think about those intersections of your capacities, the local needs, and all the talent you have amongst your faculty, students, and staff. It's important to provide opportunities for these valuable connections to be made. At Tufts, we are using our online platform, Tufts Civic Impact. Efforts organized by our Tisch College of Civic Life, which supports community partnerships and civic engagement across the university. They're providing a mechanism for our students, staff, and faculty to sign up online in advance and to be notified of volunteer opportunities as they emerge. Opportunities are still under development and we will based on community needs. Currently, we're soliciting volunteers so that we were prepared to respond when we are needed with teams, either virtually or when and if possible in person. I look forward to hearing President Ledron and President Botstein's perspectives on these issues. For my part, I believe that while the situation is challenging, we should take hope from the work of our students, faculty, and staff and alumni. It has certainly been inspiring to me to see how the members of our university has stepped up in the face of this crisis. I am so pleased that the Talwar Network and the Open Society University Network have teamed up in this new effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated, President Monaco. I wanted to say two things. First of all, we are running this broadcast simultaneously on Zoom for some participants and on YouTube for other participants. For those who are viewing this on YouTube, if you have questions, you could email questions to the following address, netcivicengagement@gmail.com. I see Jake has put that on the screen. So if you have questions for the participants, you can email them to netcivicengagement@gmail.com. If you're on Zoom, you could post it in the comment section. We will now proceed to Sarah Ledron.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me in this webinar. I think it's a great opportunity to think and to share experiences of our universities and thoughts about what we can do facing this pandemic. I must say that facing COVID-19 is a challenge for all of us. And I think in our social responsibilities, higher education institutions have a lot to do to support our community, to support our society, to support our country, and also worldwide. I think that higher education institutions have a lot to do. So our communities first are composed of different needs. We have our students, our professors, our workers. And first of all, I think our students want to continue their education. And that is something that worries them, that we have stopped activities in our campi. So as most of universities, we have gone to virtual education, and that's a challenge to all of us. University of Veracruz had developed a platform for virtual education, as many of our universities have been doing. But it is true that we're not used to that new tool of teaching. So it's a challenge for all of us, for all our community. Students are learning a new way to follow courses, and teachers are also learning to use these technologies. So we are helping our students and helping teachers, and we are preparing teachers and in courses to use technologies to teach, and we are helping our students. It's also a challenge in a country like Mexico to have the internet facilities to follow education through internet. And I think during the pandemic, it is something that worries students and teachers to continue with the credits that they were expecting for this semester. It is one of the supports that the University of Veracruz are doing with the community. Also, psychology support is important, because the environment in isolation is hard for a community. So psychology faculty are giving help through virtual tools as well. And I think that that is important to face the isolation. There is a stage of mind, a stage that is not easy for everyone to stay at home and to try to pass through this pandemic. So workers are also being helped with these tools, and we, as many of our universities, of course, and many of our countries have given the facility to our workers to do home office and to do the activities from their houses and not to go to the campi in order to keep a better health for all the community. To our society, I think we also have a great responsibility. We are in Veracruz, the Intercultural University of Veracruz teachers and students have been translating campaigns to originary Indian languages. And we are using our media, radio, TV, internet, to spread the campaigns in Indian languages, originary languages. I think that our higher education institutions have a responsibility because they have the confidence of people. We are recognized and we have a prestige. So we can use that prestige to share knowledge. One of the problems during this pandemic is that there's a lot of fake news going on through media internet networks and so on. So we have to share our resources, and we have the responsibility to share knowledge and to give confident knowledge to everyone. I think that is another way that we can help support our societies. One of the things that we have done as well in University of Veracruz is to give free ebooks. Our house of editions have a lot of ebooks that we are sharing for free, courses online for everyone to take, and creative activities. We have also our artistic groups sharing some of their performances in our platform. How can we help our country? I think that prestige that we higher education institutions share have to help official campaigns and information and supporting the Ministry of Health. And that's also what we are doing. When in Mexico, we are in a different stage than the United States in this pandemic. When everything started, there was a lack of materials. So our community, our university community, helped producing antibacterial gel because it was scarce in Mexico. And we also did, as in Tufts, producing protective masks in 3D print in our university. So we have been giving this accompaniment of our medical students' practices to make sure the protocols keep them safe, and giving them materials to protect themselves in their helping the health sector in our country. So our institution is giving them protective elements and also making sure that they are helping to attend this pandemic, but still be safe, following the protocols and having materials to protect themselves. Worldwide, I think that higher education institutions have a lot of responsibility, have a very important engagement, because this pandemic gives us a consciousness of equality. It let us realize that there are no borders, there are no nationalities, there are no races, there are no social classes. Humans are vulnerable, and I think that higher education institutions can help go through these problems, gathering our strengths and sharing knowledges and resources. The universities have the confidence of peoples. We have prestige of our societies. Therefore, we share a great responsibility. We must provide reliable materials and knowledge. We are a factor of hope to our youngs that continue their careers, and to the society to get through these times of crisis. I think that doing these kind of webinars can get us together, share our experiences, and share them with everyone that is looking for hope and to go through this pandemic and have a better society and a better humankind after this crisis have finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ledron. And now to the epicenter, at least in the US, of the virus, which is New York State. We turn to BARD President and the Chancellor of the Open Society University Network, Leon Botstein.
So I want to thank President Rector Ladron and President Monaco, and congratulate the Talawar Network for its many years of terrific work and stepping up to this crisis now. The major difference, of course, between ourselves, let's say, and Tufts, is that we're not a university with a major medical school or research facilities, and we're not in an urban area. And the same goes for Veracruz. And so we are, as Jonathan Becker, who's been terrific in organizing all of this, and Aaron Canan too, we're not in we're in a rural area and 100 miles north of New York, north of the epicenter, but within the state, obviously. And so our ability to help with practical things like masks, housing, medical assistance, and is limited. That's an obvious, as President Monaco has made clear, that's an obvious first line defense. But our what we have done first with the Open Society University Network, which is has over 30 institutions now in it, is to help places around the world where the pandemic already exists, let's say in Asia, and where it is likely to explode in the global south, to get online, following Rector Ladron's point, to be able to prepare universities to get on to a digital and virtual system so that students actually can continue their education, that they don't lose hope, and can continue with some optimism. But what both my colleagues have made clear, there's an extremely powerful economic divide that has a mirror in the digital divide, access to machines and the knowledge to use them. And as Rector Ladron has pointed out, not everybody is prepared to figure out how to do this. It's not obvious. You can't translate simply what you did in real life to the machine and to a virtual platform very easily. We, in our case at Bard, run 8 high school programs in the inner city in 6 cities, which are really in the public system, which offer inner city students a free AA degree from us and a high school diploma at the same time. And when they went online, you could see the economic and digital divide. And we need to find a way to alleviate that and to intervene so that you can actually enable those without resources, where there are single parents, where there are other adults who need machines, and there's a conflict between work and education. We need to rethink the calendar of when we teach and how we teach so that we can actually continue the education. We also have the largest prison education program in the country, and the question of how we deal with incarceration and the tremendous danger that they face, and to find a way to get more release and to try to relieve the fear that is there. Our help in assistance in getting people to go online is probably the most important thing we've done. Our focus has been on continuing education and also the public life. This crisis is tragic in its immediate moment. It also holds terrible dangers for when it is over. And that danger is the erosion of democratic rights and processes and opportunities, a tremendous economic crisis which will exacerbate inequality, a tremendous attraction to authoritarianism, even in the best interest, a kind of permanent martial law in which the authority of the state is extended beyond the desperate need to help its citizens. The potential that this crisis doesn't teach us and other nations to put a public health system into place that actually is prepared to deal. This is not going to be the last pandemic. This COVID virus is the first of what will be the consequence of a global economy and a global world where there's a lot of travel and communication. And we don't want to end that communication. One of the consequences of this we see in Europe is the closing of borders, the communities pulling into a non-cooperative way. Rector Ladron made the point that this is international, that the disease knows no boundaries of ethnicity. It does perhaps of age, but not that much. And so we need more international cooperation, not less. Maybe in this country, in the United States, maybe the message will go home that that government is not your enemy, that government actually is your safety net, and government is not something to make fun of, to disparage, that privatizing every service into a profit motive organization is not necessarily the best way to protect the population. There's also a differential by income of who suffers more in this pandemic, the poor, not the wealthy. And so there is a real crisis there that we have as universities to look forward. We have to look beyond the immediate crisis and to a longer range set of issues that we'll be faced with and be prepared for them. In the immediate term, what BARD is doing is very local, which is trying to continue the education for over the 6,000 or 6,500 students we have in our network, and to make that education not nominal, simply having a face in front of you, to really provide the same level of quality of interaction. It turns out to be more time consuming than the ordinary. You know, people think the machine is more efficient. It isn't. When you're on the screen and you're available essentially for 12 hours a day, it's possible to fill that time talking to students individually. We have a large investment in the arts. So for example, we've tried to work on ways that we can create the arts on this platform, because life isn't only about survival. The experience of incarcerated people in prisons, the experience of incarcerated people in concentration camps, the people who've been quarantined, is the spiritual life, is not something to discard. And so, since we have a strong arts component, we had a fantastic production on Friday of Carol Churchill's Mad Forest, with over 3,000 people, where students themselves made a very, very imaginative video presentation that they created and they participated in. So using the machine in the arts, in the humanities, keeping public discussions. I mean, the core of the idea of democracy is people getting together in a group. And social isolation and the banning of all public spaces is corrosive to the experience of actually feeling you're being part of a community. What we can do also online is to rescue the isolation of the elderly. The elderly are most at risk statistically in this particular disease, and many universities, I'm sure Tufts does, and I'm sure Veracruz does, is have things for people who are in retirement, people who are looking to the university as a source of nurturing for their life when they no longer are working, or their pension, or they can no longer work, or they're too ill to go out. And here we have a learning institute for the retired and the elderly, and that has to be continued. High school students, since we have these 8 high schools, we also have programs here in Kingston where, again, targeting those with fewer income, fewer resources, a lower income group, a way to get them iPads, to get them materials, to actually provide them tutoring to continue their education. The fact that public schools have suddenly been canceled, unlike Tufts, which has a great and distinguished presence in science and medicine, we have a distinguished presence in education. So sticking to our own expertise, we can actually improve the quality of what a public school student might get when their schools are closed. And particularly students who are panicked about continuing their education beyond this year. And so we have a large task in continuing the educational progress. What's obvious, and President Monaco made this point very well, we've lived through a long political period of people doubting science, of undermining science, of questioning science, of fake news, of alternative realities, of specious claims that have no basis from any kind of testing in the rule of evidence. And a lot of this has somehow never been contested. This virus and the pandemic should remind us, of how significant science is, and how much more reliable than superstition it is, and that it is the scientists who are going to find the vaccine. We're going to find the way of protecting the population from this particular disease. That the kind of anti-science, whether it's on the environment, or whether it's on vaccination, or whether it's on any of these issues, I hope that it restores some sense of balance in how we consider what universities do and their contribution to society. Not to speak of that this has shown the incredible negligence that we've shown ourselves. We're responsible to our public health system, the total lack of preparedness. And when you look into the future, by 2030, this country will be short thousands of doctors and thousands of healthcare workers with an aging population. What are we doing now to prepare for the next pandemic, for the next crisis? And last, I would say that barred through OSUN in particular, with the American University in Central Asia, with the Al-Quds University on the West Bank, with Fulbright University in Vietnam, with the emerging Parami Institute in Burma, and with our partners in Russia, is actually to help those universities deal with, to some extent, a lack of experience that everybody has, but we probably have less now, in keeping education going using technology. People have had all kinds of ideas about technology, and now we are facing the reality, and we're learning what it can do, what it cannot do. The silver lining in all this, from my point of view, is that as we fight to save people and to reduce the suffering and to continue the process of learning and communication and a public life in the arts and in public discussion, one thing that has come out of this is that the things we took for granted before the pandemic struck have become ever more valuable. And that is being with people, learning in real time, participating and going to events, and the opportunities that museums and that concerts and that theater and the dance and the things that we do collectively in a society and in a culture are not decorations. And that we have to find a way to restore them and bring them back and integrate what we've learned about what this medium can do to make them better as well. Turns out technology is wonderful and a wonderful tool, but it's not a replacement for the conduct of life in real time and real space. Our students, the thing we hear most, I'm sure President Monaco and Rector Ladron also know this, is the desire to return to communities, to rejoin the class that they cut, the lecture they didn't go to, the group they didn't participate in. And I predict, and I would encourage, a greater rate of attendance as we face the economic crisis that will stay with us after the peak of the pandemic leave the United States particularly, that a higher percentage of our young people will be enabled to go on to college and to university, and that there'll be something like the GI Bill after World War II, and that a high percentage of them will choose public health and biomedical professions in which to choose to specialize and to make careers, because they're going to be needed to protect their fellow citizens evermore. This is a warning. This is not the last storm. This is the first storm, and we need to prepare not only to fight the last war, but the one that'll be facing us. I think that's part of what we need to do in this period of time, is not only to serve directly, as President Monaco has shown so terrifically, our communities directly, but in our case, to play to our strength, which is to restore and sustain public life and cultural life, and to continue education, and to begin to think ahead to the political, social, and economic policies that we need to put into place to protect our country from a repeat of this disaster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before going to questions, I want to answer one question that was posted online and just follow up on some points that Professor Ladron and Professor Botstein made. There was a question, is what can we do to help others? And I did want to draw people's attention to the OSUN website, which is osun.bar.edu. And there you'll find a host of materials which assist faculty with the transition to teaching online. And what's interesting about that is that we've managed to draw from the OSUN network from people, for example, in Kyrgyzstan who have been doing blended learning with teachers in rural areas, or Palestine with people who have been working in refugee camps. One interesting thing I thought of when Professor Ladron was speaking is the Bard Prison Initiative. They are already working in an incredibly difficult environment, and their adaptation means moving entirely asynchronously. And their tips on how one can continue to remain engaged with students, even when one is not meeting face-to-face, are very useful, and they're all available there. So if you go to osun.bar.edu, you will find a host of materials, webinars, suggestions on assignments that we think are useful, drawn from varied and incredibly diverse experiences. I would add one more thing, which is we also learned from our partners at the Fulbright University of Vietnam of the importance of working with students outside of the classroom. What they pointed out to us, having been closed since early January, is that you need to pay attention to the whole student at this point in time. And how do you engage with students at this point in time outside of the synchronous or asynchronous work? So they learned from their mistakes early on by not addressing this, and were kind enough to share ideas and tips and recommendations, which we're also putting online. And finally, I wanted to say one of the goals of this effort with the Talwar Network is to try to collect ideas on civic engagement and how institutions, as we've heard today very effectively, can remain engaged in their communities, and to share this with the various networks we're working with, so that all can benefit from the ideas and insights that many of the challenges many of us are dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
I want to say, if I may supplement Jonathan Becker's point, that and owing to his leadership, that a lot of effort needs to be put into helping students not feel powerless in this moment. So the idea of the whole student, giving opportunities for continuing to contribute in a kind of what's called civically engaged way. I think that's what he's referring to in part about the whole student, that it's not only his or her classroom work or academic progress, but how suddenly time can be spent helping neighbors and fellow citizens, even though you may be quarantined in your home, to do that remotely. Great.
I wanted to pose a question, which I actually don't know who's posed this because it's been emailed to me from the YouTube channel. And this question is, as borders are closing, what is the importance of these international networks in higher education? And how can we harness the networks to keep societies open and fight pushback against attempts to limit rights in countries?
Well, if I may, I think the internet, the great thing about this medium and OSUN the creation of the Open Society University Network, which was an attempt to kind of link universities, particularly in areas where there was a need for a better higher education, and governmental structures that weren't quite as hospitable to freedom of expression and research, that this is a platform that can bypass the closing of borders and the restriction of travel and the restriction of the information. So the international character of learning and scholarship is a safety valve of some value against the isolation and closing in that may come or now exists as a result of the pandemic.
President Monaco or Ladron, would you like to speak to this question?
I think that having networks gathering universities is very important because I think that universities work in an ethic point of view that is to share and is not to compete. In the governments try to compete commercially, economically, politically, but universities all around the world try to have different goals. The goals is knowledge, true quality in life, sustainability, equality in gender. So all these values that we share are very important because they are worth it worldwide. So the credibility of institutions and the presence of universities in our countries, in our territories, gathered will make the difference for, as we have been saying, for when this crisis finishes or to face new crises.
So why don't we turn to the next question, which we began to hear an answer to, which is how can universities work more closely with communities? And what should we do to push governments to address inequalities that are negatively impacting the most vulnerable in our communities at this time?
I would say that in Mexico, public universities work very close with communities. We are all the time helping different needs in our regions. One of the things that Mexico does with higher education, public higher education, is that each student, when he or she finishes their career, they have to work for free during 1 year. It is called social service. And it is something that gives presence to our institutions within the communities. So we have a great credibility and a great presence, and population believes in what universities are doing and are aware of the work that universities are doing.
So we have a series of questions on the future of higher education. So let me just pose these two questions. What are the next steps for higher education? The pandemic threatens many institutions financially around the world. In what ways should we reconsider how we work as an industry? And then the next question, how should the pandemic change how higher education institutions conduct business? Perhaps President Monaco, you want to speak to these questions?
Yes, I mean, I think many of us are already involved in sort of post-COVID planning and thinking about the future state of our institutions in the context of a changing landscape in higher education, because even if we are able to come back to some form of residential life in the next year, it has changed the way we deliver education and can widen audiences to adult learners, those that can't afford a residential college education and want more of a menu type certificate, building up a degree over many years, still working part-time. I think there's many, many opportunities for the way in which this crisis will shape how we think about ourselves and the areas in which we hope to grow. Secondly, as a research university, we'll be looking at opportunities to continue interdisciplinary work across various schools, particularly engineering, data science, and medicine and public health, as others have said, in preparation for not being caught out by such a disaster the next time it comes around. And I think it will be coming back around, either this one in second and third waves or something else in the next decade that's going to look very similar.
Thank you. President Spotstein Ladrone, would you like to speak to this?
I think that following President Monaco, I think that we need to find a way to expand, as he suggests, access to higher education. The second thing is that given the economic disaster and the high rate of unemployment, I do suspect there'll be an increased demand. Also, since we're looking at an economic workplace where skills are primarily going to be a service and not physical, and that service will require training. I think certain institutions, I consider BARD in that category, will have to look at what kind of contributions they can make in areas of greatest need for employment, and that's public health and professions related to medicine and health. I think that, however, I will turn it around, that I think there will be a reaction from this experience, which is to strengthen some traditions, not change everything, but strengthen actually what residential life really means, and to suddenly preserve and augment. I don't think we did that good a job. I'd like to return to normal, but I think that normal needs to be better than the normal we left. So it's not only changing things, as President Monaco suggests, but also strengthening what it means to be in residential life. For example, in the arts, I would hope that people realize that they can be more than spectators, to revive certain kinds of participation. We, for example, tilted ourselves simply as consumers to watch professionals act, sing, play, dance, make poetry, do things in public. And we've relied simply on plugging in, so to speak. That has to change, that we have to realize that the arts are about your community, not only plugging into some global broadcast of some, hugely popular star, but actually yourself being less passive about how we participate in those arts. And we have to help people and adults learn how to do that, and find inventive ways using even this technology. So I think there's a lot of reason to be creative about what we do. But the most important thing is, as President Monaco points out, is to be prepared to extend the access and the time period, but without simply abandoning what was something that we, in retrospect, what we hear from students in both the high schools and in the college level is a tremendous desire to restore their communities.
I'm going to ask a final question for panelists because we're running out of time, and that is from Alex Lovett, who said, universities typically provide a social community building experience for young people. To your knowledge, how are your students adapting to limitations on social aspects of college life? And what are your institutions doing to maintain a sense of campus community despite the emptying of the campuses?
Well, one thing that we've tried to do with our students is there are many traditions of events that occur during the spring leading up to graduation, and many of those can be done virtually. So we're trying to keep a lot of our traditions going so the community feels engaged. But I must admit, my major concern for if we have to repeat this, obviously many of us are doing it over the summer, and that'll be another test case. But if we have to do this again in the fall, please remember that one of the successes of the current distance learning is because the faculty and the students spent more than half a semester in the classroom getting to know each other. So moving to virtual learning brought the strength of those relationships. And I worry that we have to think hard about how we might have to do this again in mass with students who have not even been on our campus. And that is going to be a challenge.
I think President Monaco has it totally right. Our transition has been successful because it's on the basis of relationships developed in real time. So transferring to online is a lot easier. And he's absolutely right. If you start just with online, it's much harder. I have to say that the creativity and the energy of the students and faculty to sustain those communities. I'm in the field of music, so my one teaching responsibility is an orchestra, and that has 70 members in it, and in a conservatory, and their desire to find ways to play together online, to share things online, to keep together is very, very high, and so it's not only sustaining the rituals and traditions that President Monaco described, but also finding new ways for them to stay in contact. The really important question is, if you had to start online, how do you do that? But I think the creativity and the ingenuity that has been shown both by staff, faculty, and students has been very impressive, with directly the intent to sustain and form communities.
Professor Ladron?
I would say that university communities have this consciousness of belonging to an institution, and it's the institution itself that has a leadership. And this crisis has given us also a consciousness of all the resources that all universities have. So I think that is not only community within the university, but it's also the consciousness of a community of all universities together, because we're sharing our resources, we're sharing our books, we're sharing our courses, we're sharing the warnings and the campaigns of what we must do in this crisis. So I think that this challenge is also giving us an opportunity to be present, to accompany this crisis, and to do this community feeling for all the universities all around the world.
Which is why the Open Society University Network was founded just at the right time, just right before this crisis hit. So the idea of linking universities around the world was realized, the creation of a framework just on the brink of this pandemic.
So, if I could just say one final point, one of the value of these networks in this type of crisis is that the world is in different phases of the crisis, and we're learning things from Europe, and now we're perfecting ways in which we can block and tackle this, which I'm hoping by sharing this through the networks that we can help those countries that are slightly behind us as they prepare in the next weeks to months.
In the global South, particularly, yeah.
So let me take this from the big pandemic issue to the narrow student civic engagement issue. I mean, the last question was great. And I think one of the important things that we've been doing here at Bard is supporting our students' continued engagements in their communities. That community might be here, where we're partnering with more than 40 local organizations, be it delivering food, making protective masks, providing educational program for school students who are really suffering in the transition online. or where the students are situated across here or across the globe. One of the things we're doing with the Talwar Network, and again, this is the first of a series of webinars and other activities about sharing experiences, just as we've heard. One of the things we are doing, and we will be announcing immediately following this meeting, is an award for students who have maintained and adapted their civic engagement activities outside of the classroom during this period. So if you go to the Talwar Net website or the Open Society University website, osun.bar.edu, you will find later today an announcement of a series of COVID awards in which students, undergraduate students, who are adapting to the current environment, adapting their civic engagement activities, will be recognized and awarded, and those students will be present at the next Talwar conference, whether it be in person or virtual. I want to thank all of our panelists, particularly President Monaco and President Ladron from the Talwar Network. I want to thank Laureline Hoyt, and I'm very saddened that she can't be with us today, and thank all of our audience for participating in this. This is the very first step in the partnership between Talwar and OSUN, and I think it's gotten off to a great start. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for posing questions. We're sorry we could not get to all of them, but that's why we're having 5 or 6 more of these. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.